Well, hey there, friends. My name is Leslie Hughes. I am the principal of Punch Media, a LinkedIn profile writer, and I want to welcome you to this series of videos that I am going to be doing weekly, Wednesdays at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, to talk with some of my greatest colleagues and some of my closest friends about how to brand yourself using channels like LinkedIn. Now, this week, I had a few little technical difficulties, so it didn't necessarily go live, but what you'll see is the recording that Amy and I had, just a live chat that we had together, which didn't go out on the social channels, but I really wanted to make sure that you saw it. So please enjoy my conversation with Amy Davies from First 30. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So anyway, we'll just start, right? So I'll introduce myself. That's the first part. So I'm Leslie Hughes. I'm the principal of Punch Media, and I help entrepreneurs, professionals, businesses to help empower them to tell their story using channels like LinkedIn. And I am so excited to bring not only my colleague, but now one of my closest friends. We met as professionals, and we're now besties because I'm just so excited that you're going to join us here on this, Amy. And I'm just going to give a little background of Amy that used to work at Wrigley's, at Rogers Communications, Ackland's Granger.
It's actually easier now. It's Granger Canada. They've rebranded. Yep.
Cool. And so Amy I'm so wowed and impressed by her program called First 30, and honored to have been asked to be a participant, one of the trainers for that. So I'm excited for you to tell everybody about First 30. And you're also the author of A Spark in the Dark, Illuminating Your Path to a Brilliant Career in the Reorg World. And I realized I have an e-version of your book. I don't have a hard copy to...
Oh my gosh. And you actually, we gave me an endorsement for that book. So I will have to, next time I see you, masks on, social distance, yeah. I will put the book down somewhere and let you get it as long as you're 6 feet away, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great book and I love it. And I've learned so much, and I can't wait to talk about, especially imprinting, which I'm so excited for you to talk about because I think that that's such a crucial thing that people need to know about. So let's just chat a little bit about First 30. So what does First 30 do?
Sure. Well, First 30 is designed to help businesses when they are managing layoffs. So when a lot of businesses manage layoffs, they really want to help their team members who are affected get over the experience of job loss and then get a new job, get back to work. So the First 30 program has many different parts. There's a virtual component. We run webinars all the time. We do resume reviews, and we really help people who have been affected by job loss get back to work. But we're a B2B company, so we work with the businesses, and those businesses sponsor their employees to go through this program.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I think that the one thing that I've seen in your program is not just sort of resume writing, which is great, and I contribute to some of the LinkedIn stuff, but it's also helping people navigate as they go through the career transition. And I think, one of the things that I learned from your book was like, we're not lifers anymore. We're in constant flux, changing jobs. And I think, we've learned, especially with COVID, that nobody is sort of living, nobody can feel sort of guaranteed to, to have their job for an entire life, which our parents did. Our parents, had their jobs and they said, you stick it out no matter what. And now this this fluctuation that people are going through with career transition, and it's an emotional time. And so I know you even have people on your in your course that really help people navigate through the emotional hurdles of that too, because it can be
that's right. And one really important component of the program is there is a wellness component with an amazing clinical psychologist, Dr. Mary Lynn. She talks to users about what are the emotions they must be feeling. And it's interesting because it's not just the emotions that you have from being laid off. Then you go out and you're in the world of interviewing. And my goodness, that is a tough place to be right after you've been let go, because it's rejection on top of rejection when you don't get your job. And I've been there. And we talk a lot about, how to handle rejection. I have an excellent expert in the program, Richard Gaulis, and he talks about, he has this great process for handling rejection. It's very surprising what he said, and I remember hearing him talk about it in a presentation. And I went up to him after, I'm like, you have to be in this program to talk to people about this topic, because when we're on LinkedIn, as you know better than anyone, Leslie, we're putting our best foot forward, right? We're talking about the jobs we got, the promotions we got, all the successes we had, where we're speaking, right? We don't talk about our failures. We're not talking about the jobs we didn't get. We're not talking about the promotions that we were overlooked for, right? So we have this very false sense of what everyone else is experiencing relative to us. And it makes the world more lonely, especially in a time where we're locked down and social distancing. All we really have is our access to social media. And we always just have to remember that, we have to look at our own profiles and what we post and ask ourselves, is this really a true reflection of my whole life? Like, if somebody could see behind the curtain, what would that look like to them? And recognize that just because people look like they're successful and that everything's okay, none of us are okay right now.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
I know that's not what our talk is about today, but it's important to recognize that so that we're not feeling. Yeah.
To address these things, because I think that's the one thing that I've learned writing LinkedIn profiles for executives is that, I was even interviewing a CEO of a very big organization this morning, and it was interesting that he even said to me, like, oh gosh, I don't want to come across like I'm bragging. And how often that comes from senior executives, that they don't want to seem like they're when they're upgrading their presence and they're branding themselves and things like that. And some of them, confidentially will tell me that they're open to opportunities, that they may actually be doing okay in their job currently, but they're always looking at something new.
Right.
And hence why they're not just investing in their presence to look for opportunities, but they're investing in their presence also because they're the forward-facing brand ambassador of an organization. But I say this because I always assumed that, you get to a certain level, you got it all together. You can tell your story. You can put it out there and brag like nobody's business, but nobody feels that way. Nobody feels comfortable sort of saying, these are my accomplishments and I feel really great about them. So I think, sharing that vulnerability of how we feel when we're going through job transition and the rejection and all those things, we're all afraid of getting rejection, whether it's career transition or even just telling your story, branding your story. And there's something that I've just learned recently. There's a name for it. Have you heard this? There's a name for it.
Impostor syndrome?
Well, the imposter syndrome, but I think it's been studied, and it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger
effect. I have heard of this, but I don't know a lot about the details.
I don't know about the details either, but I was like, there's actually people who studied this, and it's not just, us talking about the imposter syndrome. So it is interesting. And you've been featured on national television, or you've been featured in like magazines and that kind of stuff too, and putting your book out there. And I just admire you so much, Amy, because I see what you do, and I see how you put yourself out there, and you've received awards, and you seem to be so brave to me, where I go sit back and go, oh my gosh, I'm inspired by Amy, because you have put yourself out there, and I admire that so much about you.
Well, thank you. But I will say that one of the things that was really important to me, and when COVID hit, was I had all of these resources that I could share, and I did share First 30 accounts. I donated those, and then I started running webinars. But, I'd done a ton of presenting, and I'd never run webinars before. And I'll be, totally candid. I was really nervous the first webinar that I ran with the users on the First 30 program. And if we had opened it up and there was, 150 people on this webinar, I was terrified. But you know what? For one thing, the audience was so warm and generous. And over time, I do them every couple of weeks now. Now I feel like it's natural. Our conversation right now is very natural to me. It's like getting together for coffee with somebody. And when I do these webinars, I feel so comfortable. So what I would say is, if you're focusing on your career success, really do put yourself out there and make yourself feel uncomfortable. And you went through that today, Leslie. You're live streaming, we hope.
Freaking out.
And if you're not, we're going to find out in an hour. I know a couple of people were obviously able to get the link in here and join as well, but I think for the most part, it's a live event. and you
Things go
just do
wrong.
it. Pardon?
And things go wrong, and afterwards we'll all go, oh,
And
well,
you
you learned.
right, and
You
you
learned.
just have to accept that. And yeah, because we're all learning our about the imperfections that we each have, and we just have to, we can't hide anything from each other anymore, because I'm in my house right now, my kids are here, my husband is here, my puppy is here, who knows what's going to happen in the
Apparently,
next hour.
like that.
Yeah, they
That
might
one,
all come trekking through.
like that one poor
Yeah,
guy that was from the BBC, and the kids came trucking through, and the wife is
yeah,
pulling the kids out of the room. I mean, we're all
yeah,
sort of getting in
yeah,
that place,
yeah,
we're afraid that something's going to happen. But I think that's it's made us a little bit more human too. I mean, that's
for
we've all
sure.
sort of the sort of the exterior sort of branding of like, oh, my life is so important and so positive
Right.
and that kind of stuff. It's like I say all the time, people are like, is this a real background? I'm like, that's my real basement. But if you saw
That's
the
your
rest of the
real
basement, it's
brick.
not beautiful. It's not perfect. There's a treadmill. There's stuff.
Yeah,
There's stuff going
yeah,
on. It's just all smoke and mirrors, right? So
right.
yeah, it's wild. So I have some questions for you because I
Yeah.
want to be prepared. So how did you get involved in your career in the first place?
Well, I worked, as you mentioned, in large global organizations. I moved to UK, worked for over. I worked for Rogers. I worked for Mars Wrigley and Granger. And what I found was there was always this flux. There was always these layoffs happening. And when I worked at Unilever, it was the first time they had ever gone through a massive restructure. And I'm talking to people who expected to be there for their entire lives, and they were panicked. And because the work that I did was considered a cost center, so my background is market research, my role was often affected when restructuring happened. So I was really, it made me very, nervous about continuing with that particular career. And I loved, I was always writing this book half-heartedly. And I was that person that people would go to and share their deepest, darkest concerns with at the office. So I was like the friend of everybody, talking them through this career transition. And I really felt like I had a passion for it, but I also had the ability to help people in meaningful ways make decisions about their career. And then when I was put through outplacement, I got a lot of value out of it. I just thought that there was a better way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote the book and I started developing the program. I did a ton of research with people who had gone through these programs to make sure.
That's your background too, is research.
Exactly. But this program is for the users.
Right.
Of course, I sell into or not large companies, the HR departments, but my heart is with the users, and I want to make sure that they're getting what they need.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, if, and the clients that you have from a human resource perspective, it's only benefiting the audience, which are people either, they've had to transition out, or you offer onboarding services too. So people that are sort of in flux,
Yeah.
It makes the company look good when they have these kinds of services, because it makes the end user, who's the person who is in that career transition, it helps them as sort of like a best friend or a, guidebook to help them along the way. So I think that's really important. So that was my question, is like, what makes you passionate and driven about what you do? But obviously it's to help people, really, at the end of the day, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, it's to help people take control.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I love about the First 30 program and the book it's about taking control of your own outcome. No one cares about your career as much as you do. And if you're not going to take control, and that can mean many things. It can mean, one thing that I don't like that I see in it, and we're going to talk about imprinting shortly, but one thing I don't like is people getting in a job they don't like and just not trying. I've been in jobs I don't like, but I always tried my hardest to do the best job possible, because I learned from that. I took pride in who I was as a professional. And then you're going to bump into these people that you worked with all throughout your career. And if they remember you as someone who was negative and slacked off all the time, they aren't going to open the door for opportunity for you. And we often, the world is so small now, especially because of things like social media and LinkedIn. It's so small. So we're going to run into these people again and again and again.
We
So,
absolutely do. Yeah. And as I
mhm.
was saying to you, Amy, that, thankfully because of the careers, I've had multiple different, jobs that I've had and things like that, and the networking that I've made, that to your point is that I've made friends with people like yourself, or and I've got now a list of, I was saying, like at least 40 people that I can reach out to, say, let's talk about branding, let's talk about the lessons that you've learned in your career, because I think that these are
Sure.
important lessons to learn. So I really want to talk about imprinting and the importance of that. So
Mhm.
tell me, so you start off talking about it, because it's so fascinating for me to learn about, like what is imprinting, and why is it so important that we know about it.
Yeah, it's something we don't talk a lot about in the professional world. And I often will ask myself, why aren't we talking more about this? Instead, we say first impressions matter, but then we don't really understand what that really means and the impact that has on our career. So, what imprinting is what happens when you have an interaction with a brand, with a category like chocolate, or when I love beer, right? For the very first time, it's going to have this long lasting effect. And that's it. What happens is like taking a blueprint of a picture in your brain, and it stays there forever. So imagine you're meeting somebody for the very first time, and they're late, even if it's not their own fault, or they're disheveled, or they or even really nervous, which is hard because when we're in interviews, we can be nervous. There's ways to overcome our nerves, and we'll never get over them, but we can certainly master them.
Mhm.
That belief, what happens from imprinting is it's cognitive. So we can't change the way that brains function in humans, right? And what happens is there's a belief system that's built. It happens with, and I'll talk about it again because vaccinations are a pretty big deal right now. And we have people who believe that vaccinations are harmful, a segment of the society, and they've built a belief system. They have imprinted and built a belief system about vaccinations being harmful.
Mhm.
So any messaging from the media about vaccinations are not harmful, you're not going to change an established belief system. What you have to do is talk about the consequences of not getting vaccinations. When it comes to children, what are the stories about children who haven't been vaccinated and the worst has happened? So all these worries that you might have had will take a back seat to the new worries you now have, and a new belief system will be built.
Mhm.
All that to say, this is not about vaccinations, of course, but all that to say that once you have established yourself and you've imprinted with a person, they have built a belief system about you. And no matter what you do to demonstrate the opposite, it's going to be really hard for you to ever change their opinion of you.
Mhm.
So that's why when we are showing up for interviews, when we are starting new jobs, even when we're working in a new job and we're interacting with new people all the time, we have to think very long and hard about well, first of all, it would help to have thought about who we are and what do I want to convey to the world. What are the three things that make me me? And those have to be things that you can sincerely achieve. Like those are things you have to be able to project. And you have to project them when you're in person. You have to project them when you're on social media, when you're making your Facebook updates, right?
Mhm.
And through difficult times, right? Like a lot of people go through tough times, like divorce in their life. You What you say to others and what you say in social media becomes part of how they understand you.
Right.
And these are really critical periods in our lives, and they can shape our outcome if we're not careful about the messaging.
100%. And to that point, even and even just even talking about the vaccinations and things like that, and it's tough because the political climate is so polarizing right now, that I've changed vendors as a result of things that people have posted, maybe on their personal social media sites and things like that. So and I think, to your point about that imprinting, and like if we were looking at, and I'm sure you've realized this, working in the corporate world, it's the same thing when we sell anything. It's this path to purchase. And I think Google
Yeah,
calls them micro moments, all the little micro moments
right.
that we have on the path to purchase. And so every single time we're either we're building trust with people, or we're actually ruining the relationship that we have with people. And I
Yeah.
don't think we think about ourselves as brands that much. I think that there's a lot of people don't recognize that everything we do is a result of our own personal brand, even in our non
Right. And
efforts.
it's understood that.
Yeah.
It's understood that way in the world. And it was funny because before you and I got on this call, I thought, okay, I know that I'm going to be in black, obviously, and you're going to be in a really bright color. And that's because to me, that is part of your brand.
Yeah.
And that is not, it's not that I'm thinking through my brand. I think black is such an easy color to wear.
Yeah.
But you know, I expect that from you, and I know what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you delivered on it, and we can talk about it now.
And even when I show up to the college, like,
yeah, so people do tend.
Yeah, well, even when I show up to my college class, when I show up to my college class, and when we were doing it live, I would show up like not in sweatshirts and jeans like maybe some of the other instructors, but I show up as if I would show up to a corporate business meeting, or show up like as if I'm speaking at a conference. Put my little high heels on. Like, I don't necessarily need to wear heels, but that makes me feel like I'm getting into my uniform, my brand. It makes me feel good about myself. So absolutely, you know, how we present ourselves to the world.
It's so important to do that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I wanted to say, because I was talking about something that was conscious that I thought about you, a lot of what happens with imprinting, we're not even aware of.
Right.
So we feel a certain way, like we might love chocolate, but we don't know why we love it so much and why it's such a ritual for us. And if we went back, and I used to study this with brands and categories, it was the first few interactions you ever had with chocolate. You shared it with someone you loved, you know, you had this milestone moment in your life that it's very hard to remember. Like, I am petrified of flying, and I never understood why my entire life. But then, you know, about 10 years ago, I went back and I thought about, you know, why am I so afraid? Never had a bad experience on an airplane. I've flown a lot. And it was back to a James Taylor song, Where is Fire and Rain? And that song was not about someone dying in a plane crash, but I thought it was.
Okay.
And the words stuck with me, and I was always imagining this plane falling out of the sky. And I realized that went back to when I was about 8 years old. And I didn't even realize until one day, I'm like, I have to figure out, is this a premonition? I need to be more relaxed. And it helped me through the process of understanding. It's like people who are terrified, again, vaccinations, terrified of needles. You know, I used to know someone who had this like phobia of birds, which is a funny one. But why? There's always a reason why, and it can go back to your imprinting. So when I tell people and I talk to them about really carefully constructing the image that you put across, and I say constructing, but I know it has to be sincere to who you are. You have to, you know, you can be the best version of yourself. You have to work on that, but your best version's probably pretty good if you keep working. And that's what you need to be conscious of projecting to the world, not just when you're interviewing, but also when you're starting a job. If you're late the first day or the first week, even if there was a ton of traffic, it's actor observer bias will kick in too. So they're going to blame on their lateness the traffic, but they're blaming you for your lateness. So getting ahead of any of these problems, I talk about this a lot in A Spark in the Dark too, and all the things we should consider about how we show up really well when we start a new job. And I go through each one and talk about how you can do that. Is going to help us so much, because if you can make a great first impression in those first few months, you will have such a wonderful experience with your organization if you're in the right place.
So I guess the question would be, so what about people who are saying, well, I need to be my authentic self, and so putting myself out there, because I've seen them, and I think you've seen them too, maybe people that we've known, you know, and they'll share really public things on their Facebook page to, you know, or even on LinkedIn. I've seen it on LinkedIn where people will post very personal things, and but that's my authentic brand by opening the kimono and sharing all my warts and all. What do you think about that? Like, what?
Well, you know, that is obviously up to the individual, but there are consequences. And because you're ready to share these things doesn't mean the world's ready to receive them. Again, it's a personal choice. But if these are things that others might interpret as being cruel or oversharing, if it makes them trust you less, then that is going to be a problem for you. And like I said, it's not just being a version of ourselves, it's about being the best version. I can tell you for certain, I mean, you didn't know me 20 years ago, but I wasn't the best version of myself then. And I've worked on being a much better version of that person. And it's taken time and effort and hard work to become a person I'm proud to be, right? Yeah. And if the person that you're talking about who's sharing everything, if they're happy and they're satisfied in their life and they're not harming anyone, and that's working for them, by all means. I might not agree with it, but by all means, they can be who they want.
It might. I remember years ago when, with the whole, it was when social media started up, and I was going to conferences, probably like 2008 or something like that. And I remember a very well-known blogger at that, a mommy blogger at that particular time, and she said, "I'm not going to work with everybody because I'm feral." Like, she knew that she was polarizing, and she spoke her mind. Yeah. She recognized that not every brand was going to work with her. Her authenticity it could be, as I said, polarizing. It could be confrontational, things like that. She was talking about things, I can't really remember what it was about, but she knew the consequences of sort of putting her life out there and being outspoken about it.
Yeah, for sure. Right, and not everybody's going to agree with you. And I'm a feminist, and I feel like often women go out there and they are men are rewarded for the same behavior that women are kind of punished for in business and in life in general. And I don't agree with that. So if it means standing up for what you believe in, again, I'm a really big believer in that. But if it's just to be cruel and to have a really strong opinion about something is polarizing and starting debates and getting people angry and uncomfortable, then we really have to, I believe, ask ourselves, why am I doing this? And why am I doing it on social media? Yeah. Why can't I have the conversation with someone individually if I'm upset with something? Or
yeah. I think that's important. I don't think we necessarily even think about the consequences. You and I both have, kids that are sort of entering those teenage worlds. And as I teach my college students too, is, what goes on stays online. Even if you think it's private, it can get screen grabbed and so on and so forth. So, I don't think that people necessarily are thinking, about the future. And what I say when I'm doing my conferences is like, the things like this that we're talking about, our great grandchildren may see, see the legacy of that and what am I putting out there? Am I proud of what I'm putting out there? Or am I going to be like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that? But that's my brand. That's sort of, and I think you and I are on the same.
That's right. And it's about this regret.
Yeah, 100%. So, Amy, you wanted to talk a little bit about like your first job, your experience with that. And so tell me a little bit about your first job. And was it
you want me to tell you about my first job?
Well, I think that's what you wanted to talk about. I think there was a lesson.
Well, I can certainly tell you. I have to remember what my first job was. But I want to talk about people starting their first job. I don't want to tell you about my first job and what I did. I thought, now you're making me remember what was my first. So as a babysitter, I think that's the very first job that I had. I loved babysitting as a kid, and I started that when I was 12 years old. But and I'm sure I delivered papers, and I remember working as I worked as a cashier at Shoppers Drug Mart for a while when I was a teenager. But anyway, that's actually a good segue. And I was a waitress for years and years and years at all kinds of different. That's a really good job for learning how to interact with people well.
I liked it.
Yeah, I did as well. But what I wanted to talk about today is other people when they start their jobs. And I think that we did cover a lot of this. And I want to make sure that when people show up for their first jobs, we're showing up virtually now. So that's really different. Whether you're interviewing or showing up for your first meetings, it's worth letting people know on by email, like, hey guys, I'm here, looking forward to meeting everyone. Because at 9:30, if you didn't log on and everybody else is logged on, there might be a glitch because you're new to the team and maybe you didn't, click on, you did something, you made a mistake with your technology. then you have sent them a note and said, hey guys, I'm here, looking forward to meeting everybody. They know you're there and they're like, oh no, Amy's not here. What happened? Hey, Amy, we're all on the call. You're not here. But if you never sent that note and then you get on the call 10 minutes late because they had to chase you down,
right,
it's not going to bode as well as just get ahead of it. That's what, get ahead of it. Think about, where you are in the house. And again, life is happening all around us. But even if for the first few weeks we could create calm, right? Like, I do have a puppy running around, but I've got like someone looking after him right now. And like I said, don't let him bounce around upstairs.
right,
But over time you can start to let your hair down a little bit.
right.
But in the beginning, making sure you're very reliable. And the other thing is, now that again, we're not meeting people in the office, if we're working certain types of jobs, be very responsive to emails, especially in those first few months. Make sure that you're getting back to people. If you can't deliver what they want right away, make sure that you let them know, well, I don't have that for you now, but I am going to do this. Mm-hmm. And then make sure you're updating regularly, because they don't know you. You're a stranger to them. And I think what I've talked to people who go into jobs and they're like, but I am great at what I do. I'm like, you know that, but now you have to demonstrate that for everyone else. And once that's demonstrated, again, they'll build a belief system about you by now. So if something goes wrong and you're really late for a meeting, or you miss a deadline, and they'll say, they'll just say, that doesn't sound like Amy. Yeah. Or Leslie, she would never miss this meeting. And so then they blame, then now actor observer bias is working in your favor because they're blaming the circumstances. They're not blaming you. Right. And these little fixes as we're in a new role and trying to build relationships and build credibility, that's what we're doing as much as anything else. It's really going to help propel us in that career and with the people that we're engaging with.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I know you wanted to talk about interviewing as well. So is that does that sort of segue into like the interviewing thing about like, so before you get the job, you've got to interview, which is always intimidating and scary. Like even just doing like today, like, I mean, working with technology and everything like that, I was like, and I see that it probably didn't work as well as I was hoping it to, but that's why, of course, I asked you to participate. And it is nerve wracking, and interviewing is the same thing, being on that interview for the first time.
Again, yeah. Interviews be for people because in terms of the questions that we're going to be asked, we're not sure what those questions are. I have an exercise that's in the First 30 program, but I easily talk about it now. Allows you to get prepared, and you tell your career story from the beginning to the end, writing it down with a pen and paper. And then when you're called on in the interview to for Unilever in the UK, and I did this and this and this, and you're telling it like a story. One of the more difficult moments in your career, or what was a crisis you handled, and how did you store it up here? So you're not getting nervous because you have it all. You're going to remember it, and that's a big reason people get nervous. The other thing is that making eye contact, making sure that you're sat up squarely. It sounds like a silly thing, but your body language is very important. Handling does help warm up a room and helps you build a relationship with the person. I'm just trying to think of all the things. There's so many ways. Even the way we use our voice can really help. But if you are able to really and show a person like I upon, and that you have all that running. Used to play a game where I had to make a file. And it was interesting what happened, and then I try to remind them of that. right before it ended. He's back. I felt like I was
Go figure.
gonna have to.
Yeah, I'm having technological
There
issues.
you are. You're
Yeah,
back.
I'm having
But
technological
actually, this is a really good moment to share. And you know what, though, Leslie? I find in interviews, these types, right? Our technology can be glitchy. You know, our dog can run across the back. A
Yeah.
child can start crying. But
Or I
and
could
I'll
start
share that
crying.
the other day I was actually giving a webinar, and my puppy had something in his mouth, and I had to like lean. Pardon me.
Oh, I said, or I can start crying.
Yeah, to
I'm still
lean
having issues.
over and get it out of his mouth. So what ended up happening was I was talking to people. That was really embarrassing. I have 50 people on the call, but it's about how you recover from these moments that is going to, as someone storm and handle difficult situations. Everybody knows we're dealing with stuff like and kids driving us nuts and all other things. So it's just, how do you recover from that? And if you can recover from it well in an interview.
Well, I don't know if I'm recovering. It's still glitchy. I can hear like bits and pieces, but I mean, hopefully it's recording because it didn't knock you off. It really knocked me off. So
No, it didn't.
yeah. So I think, and I think the other thing, if anybody, if you guys can still hear me, I think sometimes we think that other people can see how nervous we are as well. And I learned that the first time I actually had to do a big presentation in front of a big crowd, that when it was recorded and I look back on it, even when I was on the social, I was terrified. I was petrified when I went on the social, and I see the mistakes that I made. But I think if I'm looking at it from an objective point of view, not everybody else is going to see that same. I mean, if you, behind the scenes, I was like going to like Jess and to Melissa, I was like, oh my God, freaking out. Like, I'm going to be on television. I was freaking out. But when I did it, I think I came across as maybe a little stiff for me because I wasn't sort of being my authentic self, but other people couldn't see how nervous I was. So I think that's something else that we all need to recognize too. And every single time I speak, doesn't matter how small or how big the crowd is, I'm always nervous. I'm always nervous.
Right. And yeah, there's a really good body language expert, and a lot of people who are listening and have probably heard of her, Amy Cuddy.
I love her.
Yeah, and she does talk about how to train your brain through your body language. And a great one to watch, a TED Talk to watch, is hers before you have a job interview. And she talks about power poses and what those power poses, what they do to you cognitively, and how those can support you once you're in the interview, or whether you're presenting or whatever it is. An interview is really a presentation, a one-to-one, or sometimes it's a panel, right? So taking those same philosophies and applying them will help. And the other thing with your interviewing is prepare. I don't think people prepare enough, and you don't have to prepare for one interview. You can prepare for them all in one shot by doing mock interviews with friends or family. And again, that will get you to get in the room and have this wonderful presence when you get there, because you're prepared for the questions. You have a general sense of how you're going to answer them. And you've got your friend to feed back if your background is like, there's something glaring and blinding people, or your clothes look funny or something like that, then you're ready. So it's going to help ease your nerves and also help you perform at a top level.
100%. And I think, as you say, like rehearsing, preparing, those kinds of things are so important. The other thing that I've told, and I one of the many hats that I wear, I teach new Canadians about sales and marketing. And so they're in career transition. They're in a whole company or a whole country transition.
Yeah.
And I've even said to them, sometimes it doesn't hurt to put a video bio of yourself up. I mean, we all have media agencies too, right? So we have these little tools in our pockets. These, that we can record, who am I? What do I like? Who am I? What do I do? How do I help? And that video bio can certainly create rapport, like these kinds of, I mean, you and I could have just written a blog about this that wouldn't have generated maybe as much attention because
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's just text based and things like that. Video does create rapport, it creates trust, people can have fun with it. And so that's just another opportunity that people can do, is create that video bio and then even put it on their LinkedIn profile if they want
Yeah,
to.
you could put it on your featured content on LinkedIn. And, you know, the work that you do is, it was always important, but it's even more important now in a time when we're not meeting people, to have that very strong LinkedIn profile, and for people to work with people like you, Leslie, to help them build that.
Yeah.
It can be very helpful to have a partner as you're building your LinkedIn profile that can help you get to the root of what makes you a valuable asset to to organizations.
Yeah.
And that will make you stand out amongst other LinkedIn profiles as well, because there's so much competition right now.
Yeah. And the quote that I don't know if I've told you this, but I say it all the time because it's really just a game changer for me, is when you're inside the jar, you cannot see the label. And
Yeah, that
I
is
don't
a
know
good
where
quote.
I got it from, but it's a
Yeah.
total game changer because we
Yeah.
don't see ourselves the way that other people see us. Right? Other people are like,
Mm.
oh, Leslie, you're so blah blah blah. What do you know? And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
just me. Like I'm just doing my
Yeah.
thing. And I think everybody's just like me. I think they see the world just like I do. And people are like,
Right.
not so much, not so much. So
Yeah.
it does help to have that objective, somebody else who can cheerlead, someone else who can at least review, let's say for your LinkedIn profile, even if you write it yourself, to and stand in the value of their of accomplishments and things like that. So how do you? I could go on about it, but I'm going to let you do the talking. What advice would you give to help other people stand in their value, to tell their story, to feel like, so that they don't feel like they're bragging? How would you? I've got my advice, but you go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that first of all, be honest about what you've done and what you've accomplished. I was actually speaking to someone who is the CEO of a company called WorkWolf. I don't know if you've ever heard. It's a very interesting business that is able, it kind of gives you this, like, instead of a resume, it's almost like a passport, where all of your accomplishments that you talk about are proven. They're not just things you're saying. So I think companies are starting to get savvy to the fact that they're hiring people based on a misrepresentation of who they are. So make sure that you're honest as a first step, to stand in your value, because you can't stand in anyone else's value, and you shouldn't be. So making sure that you own your accomplishments is important. And talking about, again, you've said it already, but not trying not to be somebody else, be yourself and talk about who you are. And again, it's about knowing who you are. The first step is you have to understand what your beliefs are, what your values are, and then sharing those. I find it really interesting because I talk to a lot of people who are people leaders.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at their LinkedIn profile, I say to them, well, where is your leadership advice? Like, who are you as a leader? Because these companies that you're applying for, they're going to want you to come in and be a leader again.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't even talk about how you're positioned as a leader and the value you add, and how you encourage people to work at their best,
Mm-hmm.
so think about what will be valuable. I think that's what people miss. They don't understand what a business will value. I always suggest to people, they write down, if someone did their job badly, what would they be doing? That's how I try to help people write their resumes. And what are you doing differently from those people?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that will help you understand what kind of value you can add. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the importance too, and this is what I say to a lot of my clients as well, and if I haven't said it before, I say it so many times, is when you're coming from a place of service, it doesn't sound like you're bragging. Like if you're out there sort of saying, like, I am committed to my industry, I'm committed to success, and if you did those things, there's no harm in sharing those accomplishments. In fact, you should be standing in your value because people want to work with the best, right? And so if you're not putting out there to people,
Yeah.
the accomplishments that I've had, and again, getting on
Yeah.
the same side of the table as the hiring manager or the recruiter or whomever it is that you're trying to impress, if you're not telling people, I'm really good at what I do in a non-bragging way, but you're doing it because you are committed to their success,
Yeah.
then it doesn't sound like you're bragging. And you can say, I'm an award-winning, blah, blah, blah. And you can
Right.
say, it's because of my commitment to my
Yeah.
clients, my customers, the industry at large, the reason why I've been recognized. And I'm proud to have been recognized for those things. And you did it. Like you said, you're not lying. So
Yeah.
own it, do it, put it out
Yeah.
there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that you see? I mean, we talked about some of them. It's like maybe being a little, talking a little, like being, that authenticity piece of like people
Yeah.
being too authentic, of like sharing warts and all,
Oversharing.
oversharing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's obviously one possible mistake. Do you think that there's other mistakes, or have we covered, you know, have we covered most
Yeah.
of it? Because
I think that definitely people one thing that I see people do a lot is they use a lot of jargon.
yeah.
So they're talking on, what makes people gravitate towards you and what makes people want to work with you is that they can understand if you have a complex job. So for me, I ran research, right? And that's complex to a lot of people. But
Mhm.
I didn't mention terms that they didn't understand without explaining them. I didn't use acronyms without explaining what the acronym was, right? Or at least in the report, I would have it in a glossary of terms so people would understand.
Mhm.
And I think that is a big mistake people make, is they think their perception is that it's going to make them sound more intelligent or more attractive as a professional, but it actually does the opposite and kind of alienates them.
Mhm.
So that's one thing that people definitely do, and I see quite a lot of.
Mhm.
And then they don't think about what do the people around them need. We're
Mhm.
often thinking way too much about what we want to say next, or what we need, or what we want. And I've talked to people who have gone into interviews or talked to me about going to their employer because they wanted a raise because, they had a mortgage to pay and there wasn't covering their bills. And
Mhm.
I said, well, that is, an interesting perspective. And there may be some employers that'll be like, you know what, let's find a creative solution to this. But for the most part, it's not about what you need, because they have pay bands, right? And they can't pay you. And let's hope that this continues, that we keep people, so that there's equity, pay equity. That's very important. So you going to your manager and saying, I need more money because I have these financial commitments, isn't going to matter to the organization. So I would think about what do they need, and what makes sense, right? Because sometimes you have insight that they don't. Like in research, I knew research, nobody else did. You know your area best,
Mhm.
but what are they looking for, and how can you frame it for them in a way that it benefits everyone and it doesn't look like it's just a benefit to you. So as an example, there was times when there was projects people wanted to run and I didn't think it made sense to run those projects. But I didn't go to them and, like, it could be interpreted that, oh, Amy's just lazy, she doesn't want to run this work.
Mhm.
But I knew that I would explain it in the context of the business outcome, but I also explained it in the context of that individual's outcome. If they ran this project, what the fallout might be, and they could understand that I cared for them
Mhm.
and the business. And it wasn't about Amy not wanting to run this project.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your
No,
question.
absolutely, absolutely. We actually have so Maureen, thank you for your comment in there about she'd already learned about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And we also have Grace, who's asking about, how do I tell my story if during my whole career I never have had feedback or a performance review about what she's done? So do you
Yeah.
have any thoughts about
You
that?
You can always, so, you know, first of all, I wouldn't necessarily like share with us that you haven't had a performance review, but I wouldn't certainly share that elsewhere,
Mhm.
because performance reviews, everyone hates giving performance reviews and everyone hates getting performance reviews. So if people can avoid it, they will. So it doesn't surprise me when people say they didn't get performance reviews. Make sure that in your next role that you ask for a performance review and
Mhm.
that you ask for feedback, because often we're not getting feedback because we're not asking for it.
Mhm.
So now that you're in that situation, you could reach out to your colleagues that you've worked with before, if you still have relationships with them, and ask them for feedback. Ask people to write you endorsements on LinkedIn that so that you can see, and these are people that you would have worked with or know well, and ask them to do that. Like, I know, Leslie, thank you. You've written one for me. I hope I've written
I
one for you. If I haven't, I better get on it. I always say to people, don't let me see you having like 80 endorsements and having given 2 endorsements
I've given like
right.
double the amount. Like I've given that.
I'm
I've
sure you
probably
have.
like written like 40 because
Yeah.
I just I love being of service. But yeah, like
Yeah.
100%. It's I give so many because, but I have to stake my professional reputation on that person too. Like it's really crucial that I'm not just writing
Absolutely.
for random people. It's their
But this person could reach out to their friends and family and ask for, what are my strengths?
hmm
What would you say are my top 3 or 5 strengths?
hmm
And what are my, weaknesses? What are my 3 to 5 weaknesses or areas or opportunity areas, right? People are more comfortable, and let them know, give them permission to give you the hard message and say, I really do want to know. So I see feedback as a gift, and be prepared to take that feedback as a gift. So
yeah.
if you haven't got it from your colleagues, get a friend assessment or an ex-colleague assessment, and make it simple. Just say, what are my 5 strengths? What are my 5 weaknesses? And then go from there. And maybe they'll give you more context if you follow up and say, can I have a 20-minute call to go over what you said? But make sure if you do that, I know it's so easy to like lean in when people are telling you the things you want to hear and then back up when they're not. Lean into the opportunity areas too, because we all have them.
Yeah.
But anyone in your next role, make it sure your colleagues and leadership know that you are open to feedback and you want it, and ask for it, because or even give them a template to give you that feedback every month or every 6 months. It can't be all the time, but so that you are getting what you need to improve. And you can position it. I want to do the best job possible, so I want to make sure that I'm getting regular rounds of feedback, but you can't overburden with people with that either.
Right. Yeah. And I think we all sort of intuitively know what we're good at in a way. Whatever we're passionate and driven about is usually what we're pretty good at. And the feedback that I have received as a speaker, which I think is kind of funny, is that I notice that when I get the feedback forms, I'm always told like you talk so fast and
Yeah.
you give so much information, and
Yeah.
so I'd like to say that I work on it, but I probably don't because it's just natural for who I am. I'm a fast talker. I want
Yeah.
to give great information. And I think if I take away, so if even listening to the criticism, because it really kind of like the person said I seemed a little manic on a feedback form. I'm like, well, yeah, I'd rather show up and be like, excited and and entertaining and bring a lot of enthusiasm than show up and be like, so today we're going to talk about LinkedIn. If I take away that part of who I am, and if I took that feedback to heart and really like tried to, oh gosh, like I need to really work on this and really slow down, then I would take away the essence of who I am in a way as well. And I think it's important to stand in the value of I'm not for everybody. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not for everybody.
I agree with you, but I did pause, and I paused because
Okay.
I do think we should get the feedback and not
Oh, for
assume that we're
sure.
good at things that we enjoy. Because we have all watched American Idol, right?
Yeah.
So all I would say is we should feel really good if we feel good about doing something and we can see that it's making a positive difference. But I would be careful about assuming that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I think it's important to get that feedback, and you're right though. Like take it from a constructive place and realize that you're doing things to better yourself and whatever it is, and focus on our strengths. I think it was Marcus Buckingham that I think I saw him speak or something. I think he was on the Oprah show years ago, and I have spent my entire life worrying about my weaknesses. Oh, right. I'm not so great at math, or maybe I'm not as organized as I could be, or things like that, and so then I shame myself for the things that I'm not good at, as opposed to sort of standing in the things that I am good at. And I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at sort of saying like, these are the things that I've done. And again, not to come across as bragging, but these are the things that I've done. And the first time I had to, when I had been featured on CBC Radio and they called me a social media guru that day, my friend that worked at LinkedIn says, you need to be putting that on everything. And I was like, oh gosh, like I feel so uncomfortable putting that out. People are going to think I'm full of myself. And now when people call me on the phone, they'll go, so is this like CBC social media guru? I'm like, you bet it is. Like I can it now because I sort of own it a little bit more than before, when I was like, oh gosh, someone's going to think I'm so full of myself. But it's true. They called me that that. I didn't call myself that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's totally fair.
So, and so Maureen has one question about like, can it when you come across as bragging, can it be seen negatively, and how much do you need to do to maintain a balance? And I think you'll agree with me. It really comes from like being authentic and coming from a place of service. I think if you
If
reframe the
it, yeah.
brags, yeah, go ahead.
If it comes from a place, I think that it can be construed as bragging. If it doesn't have, you just have to be careful how you position it.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was clearly a value add, we don't want to talk about, I'm good at this. As soon as we start saying I think there
Yeah.
could be an issue. Instead, say, well, we went through this with the business, and here was the role that, you could say but
Mm-hmm.
the role that I played, and this was achieved, right? It doesn't always have to be about me. If you feel like you're saying I too much, you might be. And I remember when I was young, someone actually gave me that feedback and said, Amy, you say I all the time. And so I made sure to change that about myself. And even when I write emails to this day, I make sure that that one little letter is not in there constantly.
Because I do use first person when I'm writing the profiles for my for my clients. I
Yeah.
write it from first person because I want it to seem like it's an authentic sort of conversation. And I think like, so you could say something like, some of my proudest accomplishments include, and it doesn't sort of
Right.
seem like it's bragging when it's sort of like, I'm proud of these things, and or you don't want to be like, I am so awesome. You
Yeah.
need to hire me. But I think when you sort of stand in the accomplishments of what you've done, and people will know. I think authentically, people will know if you're doing it because you think if you're second guessing that you're bragging too much, you're probably not a person who brags at all.
Yeah.
It's those
You're
people that
right.
it's those people that are like, yeah, you should see how amazing I am.
Yeah.
Those people don't even want to hear that.
Yeah.
They're not even questioning the fact that they're bragging too much,
Yeah.
right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's coming down to the hour. I was gonna like, when we first talked about this, I'm like, should we talk for a half hour? It seems like we don't have enough time with the hour. So I thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, Amy, and dealing with all of these like crazy technological glitches and everything. So
Yeah.
I'm excited because, as I said, like, I'm excited to interview people like yourselves and other experts about personal branding and what they've learned from their career. So is there anything else you want to sort of cover off, or do we cover it all?
Well, I remember you'd sent me something about what was my mantra,
Yeah.
and I do have one, and that is from Neil Peart, who is, a Canadian legend, the drummer in Rush. People used to hero worship him, and he would look at them and say, be your own hero.
Yeah.
And I've given many presentations with that title about the 5 steps to, taking command of your career. And if there was one thing that I'd want to leave people with, it is that. Be your own hero. Don't look to others. Build a career and personal and professional life for you that you're going to be proud of. And when you look in the mirror, you see someone you admire.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because it's really about, it's a journey we're all on, about standing in our accomplishments. And it's something as I said, I still struggle with, even though, I have gotten comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's a stretch that we both agree all the time. It's constantly doing something new and different.
Yes.
Like even today,
Yeah.
like I speak in conferences in front of like hundreds of people, and I was terrified today to talk to one of my best friends about this. So it's new and it's different, and the next one is going to be a little bit better. So, so how can people reach you at First 30 or get your book, A Spark in the Dark? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, A Spark in the Dark is on Amazon, so that is you can order it there. And First 30, it's first30ready.com. And like I said, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it is a B2C business, but we are B2B. But if you want to join our webinars, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn is probably the best way, and I can add you to our user mailing list so that you can get access to the webinars that we've been running through COVID for free for job seekers and career professionals who maybe want to take the next step in their career. So that's the best way. But LinkedIn, I'm not great on other social media. You have to forget about what you're bad at. Not good at Twitter. I can't I'm not good on Instagram, but I'm great on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun. I keep all that other stuff on the personal side of things for the most
Yeah.
part. So
Yeah.
yeah. So if you're going to pick one channel, LinkedIn is the one to go with.
LinkedIn is the
Obviously,
one. Yeah.
I'm a little biased,
Thank you.
but
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course you are. Thank you so much for having me today. And thanks for everyone for joining. And yeah, oh, thanks very much.
yeah,
It
and
was great.
if there's like I think we both want to hear if there's one key takeaway that that from from people listening in, and whether or not you're listening to the recording, we want to hear what the key takeaway was, what you learned from today that you maybe didn't know before we started this journey together. So we want definitely, Amy and I definitely want to hear your feedback on that. So whatever channel you're watching this on, please give us some feedback.
Yeah.
And also, so I just sort of wanted to again, I've already thanked you, Amy. So I have another Amy that I'm interviewing next week, who's also a good friend of mine, and she is she's the vice president of McGregor Communications. And what Amy, her name is Amy Riddell, and what Amy does is she hires speakers at conferences, and so we're going to talk about what does it take to become a speaker. I've done the breakout sessions for her. She hires major keynote speakers because some of her conferences, which are both, it's international, so Canadian and the US. So she hires big names to speak as keynote speakers. So whether you're a speaker and you want to up level to be a keynote speaker, or you want to just learn how to speak. So, which is not easy. The first time I did it, terrified. And now I'm lucky that Amy's invited me to sort of go with her and some of her crew, both in Canada and the US. So
Oh, you're a great speaker. That's how I met you.
That's true.
I'm so impressed by the talk that you gave at Sid Lee all those years ago.
Yeah, through the American Marketing Association. That was a lot of fun, and yeah, so I'm always excited. As you can tell, I love to talk, and it's hard for me to be the interviewer instead of the interviewee. So so I'm excited about talking to Amy Riddell about that, and so and we went to high school together, so it'll be also a giggle fest, and we'll be ridiculous and so forth. So hopefully people will join us, and hopefully I'll get technology right then, so that more people can join us.
Tune in live.
Yeah, tune in live. Thank you again, Amy.
Thank you so much.
And,
okay, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for joining, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So we'll see you next time. Okay,
bye
for now.